My name is Brandy Monique Siebert, and you're watching Just Waking Up. Wow, wow, wow. You guys, today I had such an incredible conversation with Rebecca Rose. I'd like to read you a little bit about her before we jump into our interview. Rebecca Rose is a multi-dimensional galactic experiencer, currently serving the collective with her work as an intuitive, seer, and channel. As a lifelong contactee, she was originally targeted for desirable psychic attributes. She was abducted into a multitude of dark programs from her earliest years, a path that was facilitated by family members working within the top secret domain of deep state. She was taken by the Draco and Germans to the moon, where she worked in a genetics lab connected to Dulce and the Greys. Later, she was sent to Montauk, handled by military agencies with an interest in the exploitation of human consciousness and the warping of time to control future possibilities. Future Milab experiences landed her on Mars, where she was engineered as a cyborg and a weaponized asset. Trained as a pilot, soldier, and cloned repeatedly, she was eventually sold to the Draco Empire. In the outer reaches of the solar system beyond the Kuiper Belt, she was tasked with patrolling a galactic slave trade hub commandeered by Draco and protecting a significant planetary portal on Planet X. As an adult, recovering from years of dehumanizing SSP involvement, Rebecca credits her strong meditation practice as her main healing ally. Trained in the ancient spiritual traditions of Tibet, Rebecca engages in daily, silent sitting practices and inner energy work that have assisted the return of her memory and putting pieces of her life back together. From the vantage point of the soul and the perspective of deep healing, Rebecca says, I came here for this. I know I came to explore the deepest, darkest, and most savage belly of the beast so that I could experience it firsthand and be a part of its undoing. Rebecca also has a vast array of helpers, from many different realms that are assisting her now. Her light family includes a Nordic mate from Procyon and an indigenous mother and father from a previous lifetime with the crow. Through her own life experience and continual work with higher energies, she's been given the resources to assist others in recovering their own most challenging experiences, bringing light to the darkness. I am just blown away with the bravery and diligence that Rebecca Rose has given not only to her own life and her own healing, but what she has to offer her clients. I will be including links to all of her website, Telegram, and contact if you'd like to work with her with recovering your own memories and doing healing for yourself. Please enjoy this beautiful conversation from a beautiful, brave soul. I love this dearly. I hope you do too. Good things ahead. Take good care. Oh my gosh, I forgot to mention, I am currently living in a bit of a rural area and the internet is terrible, just terrible. And so the quality of this video may be a little pixelated, a little spotty, a little delayed. That said, Rebecca's camera is flawless. She comes in clear. Her testimony is very clear. You should have no problems hearing what this beautiful woman has to say and share. So take that into account. I'm working on it from my end. Future shows, I'll work this out, I promise. I love you dearly for being here. Thank you so much. I am so honored and pleased and happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I missed something there. The screen was frozen for a really long time, so I'm glad we're still connected. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Oh dear. I hope I didn't freeze during that
Mhm.
amazing
Yeah, I can hear everything, so
intro.
I'm glad we're still streaming. Okay, awesome. Great to know. Yeah.
Yay. Yay. So, welcome. I just read your most incredible intro in detail. I just wanted to give our audience like every detail that you presented, just kind of nutshelling your experience. And if we can just like take it away, and if I can ask you what your childhood, well, first, again, welcome, 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 and thank you so much. Uh, if you could start off with maybe describing a little bit about what your childhood was like that led up to these
Mhm.
experiences.
Yeah, well, so the jumping off point for that is my family was pretty involved with me getting into the programs, as I call them, the secret space program. My father worked in Deep Black with military intelligence, Lockheed Martin, and the military industrial complex, aka the Deep State. So, and he had a high level, secret clearance working on classified projects. Within that kind of matrix for many years, probably 20 or so or more years of tenure with that kind of underworld. So through the auspices of my father and extended family, this is kind of how I ended up in the programs. Um, yeah, I grew up in the Northeast, and my mother was German ancestry on both sides. And I think because I ended up in part with the Germans, Luftwaffe on the moon for a while, they kind of seek German stock out, it seems to me. They kind of want that, and some devious things that had gone on in that bloodline over probably 6 generations of dark trauma, so those things on both sides sort of earmarked me for the programs. That's like a little soundbite about my childhood. Yeah.
So this is they're kind of tracking people with specific genetics and abilities, and it's kind of in your bloodline. You're saying your father was a part of it, and what was he the one that? How did you get to from being a child growing up to entering into these programs? Was it through school or, and can you define the programs? Can you nutshell what those programs were? What are secret space
Yeah.
programs?
Yeah, and Brenda, I always speak from my own experience, not something I read online. So, from my, personal perspective, the space program is a consortium of different agencies over time co-opting human consciousness for their own agenda, and those agendas can be varying, depending upon who it is and um, well, how they're aligned, right? So for me, I was taken into the secret space program back in the 80s and 70s. So that was a different iteration than maybe somebody who was taken 20 years later. But for me, I was weaponized as what's commonly called as a super soldier and taken to Mars. Um, yeah. So I think
And
it can be a little hard to pin down what is the secret space program because it's been going on for decades and it's not just one group. And there is a method to that particular madness, and you can't pin down one particular organization. Is it the government? Is it regressive
sure,
ETs? Is it the military? Is it the cabal? It's sort of like there's a lot of involvement in here, and it's so nobody can be pinned down and be like responsible for the whole affair. Yeah.
sure. So, but it's safe to say that there's off-world existence and there's Earth-based programs that are exploring these off-world existences and
Mhm.
existing in space outside of our here and now. Is that safe to say, do you think?
That's pretty safe to say. Yeah, we can safely say that. Mhm.
Okay. Um, okay, and so at what point did you, or how old and at what point do you remember when you first were put into these programs?
Yeah, well, I want to say, I
And
speak to
psychic
like the
training.
whole
Yeah.
the whole span of my life. I would say this was predicated on the journey of the soul for me. So I had a soul mission
Mhm.
to come in and I think experience a lot of this. Again, for the journey of the soul, not my 3D human self saying, I'm going to sign up for this, but a lot goes on from what I can tell. And I work as a channel in the Akashic records, and work as a psychic. So I've had a lot of time to kind of source my own background and that of my clients. And there's a lot of times a deeper underpinning to how we end up in the programs. And this was sort of a soul journey for me. So just, I want to preface everything that I say beyond that point with that information, because I think that's extremely important for
Understood.
listeners to understand.
Understood.
Yeah. So
Okay.
when I was in the womb of my mother, there was interference with the gray ETs. This was I was born in 72. So just to like kind of give a timeline there. And then when I was 4, I started being abducted by Draco reptilians, taken to the moon to work with the Germans in a genetics lab. So that is pretty early on. They're starting to train me psychically and to follow commands and to understand that, my Earth parents are part of the program of who my allegiance is to, but that they will over time kind of own me and groom me for more, let's say, difficult assignments later on. So let's like have a little pause there. That's a lot for people maybe in your audience to digest.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the
So,
abductions for
and
me started pretty. Mhm.
may I ask the German programs? I'm understanding that it's likely that the Germans, maybe nefarious ones, or got off planet during World War II. Do you think that's when that? And I know that that there's a lot going on far before World War II. But are the programs that you were indoctrinated into or put into, is it the Nachtwaffen? And would those be the specific group that got off planet when craft were back engineered during World War II by Germans? And
Yeah,
I'm
this
not
was
trying to.
yeah. So Neknoafen would be an apt description of where I went on the moon. It was a German base. There was Nazi insignia, throughout their underground facility there, and I was working mostly with the Draco, but there's also gray extraterrestrials again working with the Germans. So that's that. And these are some of my first memories of the programs. Um, I don't recall having any rundown of the history of you're there with a need to know basis. You're very young. Nobody's telling you what's going on. So I don't know all the historical reference points of how that base was created or when. Um,
I suppose it's all speculation, like our earthly minds just want to understand and kind of categorize and classify everything. So continue on. I'm
of
so sorry.
course,
I didn't
yeah.
mean to interrupt. I was just trying
No, no,
to.
yeah. Yeah, I think our internet is a little out of sync here, so I might be having a little blips where things are frozen or so, but tracking pretty well here. Yeah, yeah. So where would you
So
like to go next?
let's see. Let's talk about the first place that you recall being off planet. If it were the moon, what kind of training did you have there? What kind of psychic training? What kind of training? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So it was again going back with the Draco reptilians, they were training me to number one, understand that I was a master being, that I was going to be enslaved by them for a very long time over many abductions. And they were training me first and foremost to understand that I was an owned being. Now, beyond that, it was a lot of psychic training to work with telepathy with some of the beings that were in captivity in their genetics lab. So I was trained to, how do I say this in a nutshell? It was like taking a screenshot of various beings' DNA with my mind and feeding it back to a sort of central computer so that it'd have all this genetic information on the beings in that we're talking about with lots of different beings. I don't even know where they were all from. Some of them are beautiful, benevolent beings. They were in captivity, in cages, not able
On the
to
moon.
be relieved of their enormous amounts of suffering going on there. So they needed a child's frequency to kind of befriend them and get into the mind stream of each individual. And then I was meant to betray them by stealing their information. So it's almost like you're befriending somebody and then, you know, um, doing a dirty deed, so to say. And it was sort of to mind program me into feeling a lot of guilt, a lot of remorse, a lot of confusion, because this would go on and on into other types of programming later. But it was sort of initially this like early psychic training is what we could break it down into.
Do you recall any specific? I know that the Nordic being from Procyon, but while you were on the moon, I know, do you remember any other like planetary or star systems that they were encapsulating there, or like that they had there or captured there? Um, or like what kind of
I
beings
don't
were there?
remember.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't actually know what all. There's so many different kind of beings, and I want to say that this lab was so big that I understand that there was a jump gate from their moon, the German moon base, into Dulce, New Mexico. So part of my memories are of the lab are actually cross referencing Dulce because I was also serving as a uh, they used me when I was a child to operate the jump gate between the German base on the moon and Dulce, New Mexico, where a lot of genetic stuff was also going on. And there was a lot of exchange between the two places. But it was so seamless going through the jump gate that you didn't always know that you were leaving the moon. So um, that's my point being that there was a huge amount of experimentation going on in those labs, and I saw like a fraction of it. So it was, creating hybrids and clones and all kinds of things with animals and human parts. And, the Greys and Dulce were masterminding their own programs to kind of work with their own genetics and try and save their race and see what they could do with humans. And the Germans had, there were so many different interests at stake here that I can't really parse it out intelligently in my own human mind right now.
So,
Yeah. So
do you
to
think that the
speak to
labs
your,
are still
who are the
operational?
ones that were, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, do you think the labs are still operational in Dulce?
No, I don't. No, I
Okay.
don't.
What about on the
When I
moon?
look at
Do you
that
believe
psychic,
that?
when I look,
Oh,
oops, I think
we
we
do
have a
have
little
a
lag.
lag. We do.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
I don't know if that's
yeah.
me. Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Do you think that the
um,
labs are still up and running in the moon?
I not to the same degree that they were. So remember, we're talking about in human time. This is quite a while ago. If we go back into the 1970s, and from here we're talking 50 years on. From that, it's not. No, it is not at all what's happening on the moon. As far as what I can see psychically, and similarly for Dulce, which is good news for us now. I think there's been a lot of
Mm-hmm.
moving on. There's different iterations of things that are going on, but they're not exactly as they were 50 plus years ago. Yeah.
Thank Okay, thank you. So, from the moon, was your consciousness taken? How were you physically transported to Dulce and then put in the jump rooms, or was your consciousness taken?
So what I remember from being, when those abductions with going to the German base started when I was 4, I was taken out at night and I would go to I always think about it in my mind as sort of like the bus stop where I'm going to taken to an underground facility, strapped in, as if you were being strapped into a roller coaster that's going to go upside down. And you've got like this, I don't know what you call it, like shoulder straps going this way to keep you tight. And then it felt like so fast. I don't even know how to describe it. I believe it was through a craft that was operated with a warp drive for its power power technology. So whether I don't know, was I taken physically or was it just through consciousness? Well, here's what I remember, and that's what I can relay. It's a little difficult for me to even parse out all these years later, but I always felt like I was physically missing. And I would come back. So this was not a 20 and back. The 20 and back happened for me in 1982, just before I turned 10 in the fall of, September 82. So these were like short out and backs, and I think they were doing that to allow my biology to how do we say, like, get used to the effects of being taken away from gravity and away from Earth, so that I could be more usable later on. It was training me in certain ways over time, thence the back and forth, rather than let's just keep her out for 40 or 20 or 60 years. Yeah.
And so you believe your 20 and back began when you were 10. What do you remember about that?
It's just before I turned 10. So I was still 9 years old. I remember it's like being sucked out of the wall of the house on the side. And I had so many night terrors, so to say, when I was a kid, in which I was mute and trying to scream, and there was beings trying to get me, and I was paralyzed. And I realized all the years later that many of these were abduction experiences. So it was on the night that I was taken out to go eventually to Mars. It's like my body's moving in slow motion, and I can look back at the house and the lights on in the kitchen, and I'm thinking to myself, I know this isn't going to go anywhere good, and I couldn't stop what was happening. It's like you're rendered completely immobilized, although my consciousness was somewhat awake. That's what I remember. It's sort of this floaty experience. At the same time, I'm also being taken up into what I would call a light ship, a light alliance ship, a Galactic Confederation ship, in which part of my soul consciousness is being preserved so that I can come back and, like, so to say, live to tell the story about it. Yeah. So there's almost like a twin abduction happening that night as I was. Yeah, so as I'm being taken out by the dark forces, I'm also being taken up and uplifted, if you will, by the light forces, which in a way has its beauty. I mean, as dark as that sounds and deviant as that sounds, there's also something. I have a beautiful memory of also being. It's like classically being beamed up, and my body feels like it's horizontally a bit ragdolled. As a child, my limbs are just hanging, and I'm going up quite literally into the light. So, yeah.
Wow. Did you have simultaneous, do you have memory of that experience beyond just when you were initially taken? Do you have memory of your experience, perhaps like when you were taken by the benevolent ones, if I will use those
I
words?
do. There's a lot of tandem memory fields that go on and on and on with them, and I'm still in contact with that group. It's a Syrian light ship. That's the ship that Tyrion is on, my Procyon mate. From that Galactic Confederation ship. So that's a whole nother probably side story, or I don't want to call it a side story, but it would take a lot many hours to, like, unravel all of this adequately. I feel. Yeah, I do have a lot of memory though.
Sure. But it was a Syrian light ship. Would love to talk to you later about that. That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, so when you were, that's so awesome, actually, to hear that. So you were taken by, was this Draco's or Gray's that took you into the 20 and back? And did you go directly to Mars, or where did you go what was the timeline, if you will, of
Yeah.
your 20 and back experience?
Yeah. Yeah, great. No, great question, because that it does need some context and grounding. So I was taken to Great Lakes Naval Station north of Chicago, which is the largest naval training center in the country, into an underground base there. And I was twinned with another little 9-year-old boy named Dean, and we would become psychic super soldiers on Mars later on. So we were trauma bonded in horrendous, horrific tormented kind of abusive ways, kept in cages, made to love each other, to betray each other, to wound each other, to save each other, to heal each other, and ultimately to destroy each other. And it's part of the program. After some months of that, we were sent to Mars through a
Can
jump
you
gate.
explain the technology? I'm sorry for interrupting, but would you mind explaining the technology behind traumatic experiences in order to create alters in some way? Or can you explain that from your own perspective? Like, what is that technology? Why is it necessary to traumatize a child in order to get these abilities?
Yeah, and great question. I think in the era, if people are listening and they've heard me on other interviews, that I say feel like I was in the cesspool of the programs where they were doing a lot of trauma-based mind control, MK Ultra, Monarch programming, and I don't know if that's still in such use today. I think they have different methods of getting what they want out of us. But at that time, there was a lot of experimentation and exploration to see how far they could push the human psyche. And there's a lot of deranged minds out there who are themselves highly traumatized that make them adept at kind of working these kind of programs. If we look at Dr. Mengele's experiments in Auschwitz in the 1940s on twins, we know that in just taking twinning as an example of trauma-based mind control, and what can become of it. There's a lot to be said for the way that twins work, whether they're blood twins or, in this case, seeing if they could make non-biological twins function in the same way as, blood biological twins who were birthed from the same woman, the same mother. They were experimenting. I always felt like when I was in the super soldier program up on Mars and beyond, that they were just pushing the limits of what they could do to transform human consciousness and bend it to their will. So there was a lot of, again, experimentation comes to mind.
Thank you. And so from the base north of the Great Lakes, I forgot the name of it, you just said. When is it, how long do you think you were there? How long? And then where did you go from there?
Yeah, just a couple of months at that naval station. Naval Station Great Lakes is the name of the base, and from there I went to Mars. We were both sent through the jump gate there, and this has been corroborated by other testimony. I have found out people that I've interviewed have sent me copy material that really corroborates that. And I didn't know that. That was really helpful to understand that. Michael Ralph, whose testimony goes back in the 1990s, was also taken from that same naval station to Mars.
And what happened on Mars? I've heard your story, like some very cool, I know terrible things. I'm not smiling at your experience, but I just heard some really beautiful, I've heard some beautiful things that you mentioned about the beings on Mars.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm trying to encapsulate all these experiences into distill things down for, so we won't be sitting here for hours on end. But, I was trained along with Dean and others, again, to amplify my capacity psychically, but also to train as a foot soldier and to be augmented chemically, biologically, technologically, psychically, enhanced in all ways over time there, with a lot of augmentation and what I would call I have a cyborg reference, that I always talk about, that's sort of not quite AI, but parts of me that were more technology than they were biology. So these augmentations went on, and I was trained to telekinetically interact with craft, living consciousness of craft that I would also learn to pilot. So I was a pilot, I was a foot soldier, and trained to do psychic recon with my twin Dean, and so on. So that's a little bit of a snapshot of that. The more beautiful experiences you might be referencing are the when I got picked up by those the native inhabitants, one race of natives on Mars, at least at the time, was a short group of reptilians, not at all Draco reptilians, but indigenous to the Martian planet. I'd been out on patrol, and I'd crashed through an insane series of events. I ended up crashing, and they took me in. I was pretty injured, and they found me and brought me back to their underground place where they lived, and I stayed with them for a while. Yeah, and they were more benevolent than other races I encountered. I don't know that they were 100% benevolent, but I have some of my best memories in the program come from that experience. Even though I didn't make it out alive, I was treated with some measure of humanity, I would say.
And what was the purpose of being on Mars? Was it still the German group that was doing these alterations, or you said it was Draco? Yeah, well,
So
so what
here,
species were
yeah.
doing advances or alternating, creating a cyborg out of you? Were you cloned up there, and then the cyborg was made of your clone? Or can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So there was a question in there about, was I owned by the Germans at that point? No, this was a lot of American interface. American military is what I remember mostly at that base on Mars, and also being augmented and surgically altered by manta beings who are working for them, or working for us, you could say. So at that point, it's interesting how, like there was this ownership by the Germans. Now there's more of a chapter in that will continue later on, but in this segment of my memory and my experiences, the Germans, I'm not at a German base. This is not Nachtwaffen. This is not Darkfleet. I'm owned differently. So it's almost like once you get a hall pass into the programs, you can be traded around, and different agencies get their hands on you. And this may have had to do with my upbringing with my mother, and her bloodline being German, and then my father working for the deep state and military intelligence here in the US. So different reasons why that might be the case. And as far as what we were doing, or what we were being trained to do, a lot of it was base patrol and protecting bases, American military assets on Mars. So some of that was super boring work. I mean, we're just trained to be, soldiers, amplified for sure, and weaponized and altered to the point where you wouldn't even recognize us as completely human at some point. So that was part of their protocol, was, again, what did I speak to? Experimentation on their captives, meaning myself, Dean, and many others. But it was also a staging ground. Once they build out an asset, or what is called commonly a super soldier, they can trade that being off through cloning and other means. And I was traded off in the Galactic slave trade, again, over to the Draco. I was owned by them later on. Now, I don't want to, get people confused about the timeline. There's a lot of information over many, many years here. So kind of keeping it tidy in the Mars compartment of things. I mean, to your point about like, what was I doing on Mars? I hope that's sort of gives a little insight to that.
Yes. Did you have emotional attachment while you were a cyborg, aside from maybe with your twin? Was there anyone or any being or any connection that you had and of course the benevolent ones that took you in? Did you feel emotion at all while in these programs? And did you have longing for things, was there any
Yeah, I do know. And
of
I
that,
love that
like
question.
human, like, mhm, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I had a lot of, I was intentionally bonded with Dean, my twin, so that I would have a lot of emotional connection to him. And why, in part, why did they do that? It's so you have an investment in the mission. If you know that the one thing you love and care about in all the world is on a mission and could be hurt if you're not on your game, you're going to have a good mission, because you're going to be really paying attention and invested in whatever the command is, whatever you're being forced to do, you're going to care about it. Other than that, I feel like we were programmed to have no fear, no mercy, and no hesitation in our commands, right? But there was fear. We're trained over time to not have any fear. Those are the altered parts, the command that would flip on a switch internally that is almost like a kill command. But in my ordinary self that wasn't activated in that, there was a lot of confusion and longing in these things that were bleeding through from my very human experience of all of this. That's what I remember now. I mean, it's emotionally complex in ways that are difficult to describe. Yeah.
Did you have any other role or assignments aside from recon with your with Dean on Mars? Was there any other thing that you were doing?
We were, I mean, I don't, you mean beside what Dean and I were doing together? We did a lot of work reconning what was going on with the mantids, the local mantids on Mars. But I think your question is something else. Could you say that a different way?
Yes. Yes. Were there any other missions that you were conducting aside from doing recon with Dean? Did you have any other role or any other jobs or missions on Mars aside from that?
Mostly it was patrolling and then seeing what was happening with the mantids. There were a lot of missions with the local mantids and a lot of training that we did to mind control them and get them to work for us. So it was a lot of co-opting of other intelligence in the local beings and the reptilians that I mentioned, the locals, the natives, and the mantid beings, and then patrolling the bases and also being, built out so I could be sold off later. So that is the main part. I mean, the training is very precise. It goes on for years. It's not messy. It's not hurried, and it is a huge investment of time, resources, intention, and money for those people that are in control.
How did you control the mantids? What kind of technology did you have that would have controlled them?
Yeah, well, so we didn't always know, as we were enslaved beings. We were owned by higher ups, people in command. We were not of any status, despite being highly valued assets. We weren't always given the full scope of our assignments. So they would sometimes have us go over to try and, how do I say, trying to keep things like a little bit on the brief side, so we're not going into deep hour-long rabbit holes here. To try and unlock the technology, high-level technology that the mantids had, to that they were protected by a frequency fence that was beautiful, radiant, extremely high-powered, and that could kill people who tried to cross the frequency fence if they weren't aligned with a proper vibrational state themselves. So we didn't always know what we were tasked with doing, but they would send us over there with a sort of, how do I say, like a surface level task, when in fact we were being poised to see if we would come back from the mission. Would we be destroyed by the frequency fence? What could we learn about it? So we were being used as pawns at times, and we were cloned. There was always backup clones. So if we got blown up, there would be a backup replica of us if we didn't return. It wasn't necessarily their primary intention to have us not return. It's wanted that we return. But if we didn't, there was a failsafe. Yeah. I do remember us going and as pilots, bombing their underground lair to like introducing a harmful frequency to their group, which is a little bit of a hive mind. They operate in a unity field. So one being is all connected to the whole group. So that's something that's difficult for us to conceive of, because we have this I'm a separate self. You don't read my mind. We're not really connected. We're separate. But in a group like the mantids and many higher level races, they're connected through a unified field of consciousness. And if you disrupt that by introducing nefarious frequencies or frequencies they're not familiar with and don't understand, you're going to traumatize them. So I remember doing terrible harm to the mantids as we raided their lair, introduced harmful frequencies, caused a completely traumatized reaction in the whole group, had them running around crazy thinking they were dying. And in those moments of terror for them, we were able to co-opt them and bring them back to base, or disconnect their allegiance to the larger group and become wayward in a way. It's like using trauma-based mind control on the mantis themselves for our own ends. So they would come and be enslaved by the base and work as techs and mechanics for us.
I'm so glad I asked that question. May I share something slightly personal?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious, do you think that it's my belief that there are frequency nets over certain locations on Earth that nefarious groups are using in order to um, uh, create a interference from, say, light ships, say Syrian light ships or benevolent galactic groups. And do you think that that's a possibility? Because I think that I am, well, I won't share. I think I mentioned a little bit about some of the things that I've been doing in my email to you. But do you think some of the groups here have these nets over them that are kind of shielding themselves from that, from galactic if you will, or galactic connection, and they're able to move about without being seen under these, and I've always called them frequency nets. I've never heard anybody use that before. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad I asked that question just to hear.
Yeah, so that technology does exist. It can be used for good or for harm, either way. So, and it can be used now, over time, not probably much has changed. So, yes, certainly that's a possibility now. Yeah.
The way I perceived it is that maybe a couple years ago, as these like light beings are coming in and kind of shifting things and looking for things and taking back the planet, if you will. I know that's a little bit of a cliche words, but I know that there are groups here and I know that they're acting on behalf of this planet. And I also think that there were little groups, or I call them hives, or little groups of like just funky, nefarious ones, and they scattered, if you will, and they went to other places where they created little strongholds for themselves, and they're hidden under these nets. I always call them like frequency nets that they're hiding. And I think I am down in here in this physical, and so I'm able to maneuver and see under the net because I live down here. And so I can see things that maybe it's a challenge for some benevolent galactics to see. And it's my belief that I'm sending signals of some of the things that I see. So it's almost like what you were talking about, like hearing you say you did recon. I don't think I'm necessarily doing recon, but anyway, back to the frequency nets, there's little strongholds of shittards down here, pardon my French, hiding under these nets. Anyway,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a
yeah. There's a
tangent.
lot
Did
to
you
that. I mean,
catch
it
that?
is a good topic. It's because everything is. Oops. Let me see what's happening here.
I hope
We had
my
a little.
internet isn't being a dork.
Yeah, we have a lot of lag here and some dropping out and some this and that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but I think we're okay. Yeah. Can you just repeat your last question, Brandy?
Oh, it was a little obscene. I was saying I think there's a bunch of nefarious shit tards down here, like hiding under these nets. There just want to be little strongholds of nefarious beings, I think, trying to hide under these networks, specifically, if I
Mm-hmm.
may be specific. Trafficking
Mm-hmm.
networks, I think, are hiding
Yeah.
under these nets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and here's what I would say favorably about that. As human beings, humanity is tasked with awakening and becoming sovereign within the full blown context of their own inheritance. As we become empowered, in other words, our consciousness raises, and what happens then, the frequency of the planet is expanded, and those frequency fences or nuts or lockdowns can't be in existence once human consciousness is raised to a certain level. So that's a natural undoing of that
Okay.
whole system, more favorably.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love it. Great
Mm-hmm.
answer. Great answer. I love it. So
Mm-hmm.
back to Mars. After Mars, you said I'm just trying to like get the timeline here. So from the moon
Mm-hmm.
and then Mars, from there, is that when you were sold to into slave trade, or that one situation that happened and then you went to work in the Kuiper Belt? How did you get to the Kuiper Belt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at some point, and I don't have memory of like how the trade off happened. Um, I just know that I had a clone that was sold into the galactic slave trade, and that I ended up out there, and I would assume through another jump gate. And the Draco themselves had so much, at least at that point in time, had so much power. There's had so much technology and so much advancement that pretty much anything was possible with them. Yeah. And I was doing similar work with the Draco in the Kuiper Belt. So for people who don't know, that's at the very far reach of our solar system. Like if you were going to take use technology that is known to humans on the planet at this time, it would take over 400 years to get there. So we would have had to use alternate technology, higher technology to get out there. But I was also on patrol protecting Draco assets. At the time, they were in command of a massive slave trade center at the edge of the solar system out there on what I know as Planet X. Um, and they also had control of a very valuable portal within the center of that planet. Now, this is back a long time ago. It's not still going on in the same way out there, but I was working a patrol craft that was living, alive, sentient, much more advanced than what I was piloting on Mars. And we would go back, and we were protecting the Draco mothership in space. So I don't have a lot of memory of actually being on the planet out there, Planet X, but more we'd take off on patrol. There'd be, a dozen of us flying out of the main mothership, which was enormous, and going out on patrol, making sure the Draco ship was safe, and coming back at the end of our shift and kind of that being that. I mean, we were just, I know there were a lot of skirmishes, a lot of, things that happened that I don't have full recall of, because I know I was fighting against benevolent beings out there, which is like, these are difficult things to relay in a way, because I'm owned by dark beings doing dark deeds because of the programming, right? So, but just all to say that the mission I was on with the Draco was very pertinent to my training on Mars as a protector of stuff, or a patrol pilot, and that, yeah.
Do you recall where and what type of beings were in the slave trade? Like, where did these beings come from? Were they Earthlings or from other planets? Were they humanoids? Did you ever see them, or did you just know that's what you were doing?
More that I knew that what I was, I didn't have a need to know or be on the ground where trade was going on with different, it's body parts, it's consciousness, it's so many things. It's not just singular beings, although hybrids and clones and these things are part of the slave trade. It was also, like I said, consciousness itself, and different, maybe glandular systems of humans. Like that was what the Greys were interested in. A lot of different races have a lot of interest in human parts, so to say, and what's going on with the human endocrine system, and how can that be useful to us, or how is that? I mean, is even trading, for food or for different things. So there's so many different. There's I mean, there'd be thousands of races that they're working with,
Okay.
and bringing, like, what do you guys want? Well, here's what we have, and what's an asset and what isn't. It depends on the race and what's being traded. So that's a complex system that I didn't have really a need to know the great details of. And it could also be said that more memory will return, but in essentially, I was just protecting the Draco assets, but didn't have a need to know about the deeper underpinnings of their trade negotiations.
What do you speculate as a human here now that has had recall of all of these experiences? Do you think that the human trafficking is contributing to galactic slave trade?
That's a really good question. Yeah. Yeah. I think it has in the past. I have a sense psychically that some of that is on the wane, which I feel like is really super good news. Um, I don't know that the paradigm of power over enslavement and degradation of humankind is, we know about this, whether it's in space or on this planet. But I don't know if what your question might be is that, our children being taken into the galactic slave trade through trafficking on Earth. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a direct line into that. It could be. I don't have all the intelligence on that, but I think things are really changing on this planet now.
Yay, good. I think so too. I think so too. It's starting to feel just really good. I don't know. I can feel the beauty. And at the same time, people are struggling with so many divisive incidents and things that are happening, but it's almost like it's peaking. I feel it changing. I love being here. I'm so
Mm.
enamored with what's happening on Earth. I know there's some really people are upset about things, but I'm just ahead. I see good things ahead.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's good to hear. Yeah, that's great to hear you say that. Mm.
yeah. So where and what time, and I know that there's so many experiences within the timeline that you've brought us to. Uh, when do you, first of all, do you think you've had more than 120 and back?
Another great question. I, to my knowledge, no. Although what I would say is that because I was cloned so many times and each of those clones have memory, it feels like I was gone a lot longer than 20 years. You have the main incarnation of Rebecca having experiences, but then when we add all these clonings, it's like, okay, this is pretty far out. How do we quantify time when the farther in this fact too, the farther we get off of Earth's orbit and the gravity field of Earth, time itself ceases to exist in the ways that we know it. So it gets pretty, the human mind and how it understands things in linear terms starts to fall apart as we dive deeper into all of these concepts. But to your point, I would say no, I don't. As of now, I don't know that there was more than 120 in back. There was just a lot of time out there. But, you know,
Did
um,
you have any memory at the end of your 20 and back when you were you 9 years old? Or no, 9 years old was when
mhm.
you were taken for training in the Great Lakes. When you were at the end of your 20 and back, when you were back in your human body, did you have any memory or what did you feel like when you got back? What was that like for you at that time? And then
Mhm.
when did you remember?
Yeah. So I would still have been 9 years old. So they take you out. It feels like you're gone for, you know, a handful of minutes and you're back in. Meantime, you've been gone. You've had all these experiences. You've been gone decades, and life is not going to be the same as it was, right? After that point, I remember things really started to unravel for me at school and with friendships and with my own inner world really degrading, although I couldn't put my finger on why. I couldn't articulate why. Every year from thenceforth, I'd have a teacher at school pull me aside and say, "Hey, is everything okay at school or at home?" And I would just start like crying. I didn't know what to say. Things were not okay. Things were not okay with my family. My father had started really drinking heavily after I got back. Correlation. I do think so. But I didn't start to remember until, you know, I had a lot of bleed through, and I can see it in the artwork I made in my late teens. That I'd made things with a female cyborg artwork that was, it kind of blew my mind when I saw these old pieces of art that I had made in my teens. There were sculptures of gray extraterrestrials and a lot of pathos in the artwork, a lot of what would look to me now as like a near-death experience happening over and over and over through the artwork. Things I was trying to metabolize, even though they were still locked up in my subconscious mind. So it wasn't until my father started to pass away, just in the past, it was in these past years, around, my dad died in 2020. So in the couple of years leading up to that was when I started to get a lot of memory back, and very, very hot and fiery, as he transitioned, 5 years ago. So it was like, there's something for me that's always happened when a handler dies, or somebody who is important to my experience in the programs finally is starting to leave this transitioning out of human form. It's like, seems to be when I get a lot of memory back. So yeah, there was a lot to that. And because he was so seminal in what happened to me, I feel like the space memories didn't really come forth until he was on the way out. It's almost like, okay, now, Rebecca, it's safe to remember. You can do your recall now. Up to that point, it probably would not have been super safe for me to remember everything.
I understand that. Um, what was that like for you? Like when you did start to remember, how were you feeling? Like how did it affect your life in your body now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. And I've said this to other people, like I, at the time, was working as a full-time visual artist. I was spiritually minded in the sense that I was always asking questions about, the nature of reality and why are we here and what's the nature of the soul and all those things. But I wasn't on the path of like, yeah, ETs, no, thank you. And, I had a lot of catching up with these topics to do before I could really come to terms with what happened. Like it caused me so much cognitive dissonance to like really remember things that I thought I was losing my mind. I didn't believe in ETs. I didn't believe in quantum consciousness. I didn't believe in a multidimensional reality. And I certainly wasn't doing the work that I'm doing now, which is I work full time as what? A psychic, a seer, and a channel, a reader, and a healer. I mean, I could not have ever imagined that. The beautiful part being that I'm now using the gifts that were co-opted in the programs for my own betterment and the betterment of those that I work with. Now that's a huge win. Yeah.
What were you doing before this? What was your profession prior to all of this?
Yeah, I was working as a full-time studio artist and doing artist
Oh
residencies
yeah.
around the world, teaching, having gallery shows. I was a painter and sculptor. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that was your full-time profession before? Wow.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. And so can you tell me about some of the services that you offer to people now and how you assist others?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and beautifully so. I'm very, very happy about the work that I get to do with other people. I work one-on-one in really transformative ways. We do Akashic reading, soul counsel sessions, quantum healing sessions, galactic attunements, past life readings, starseed coaching, inner child integration, and a lot of other things. I'm also teaching group courses geared toward people who are just waking up and wanting to learn to meditate and tune into their own inner intuition, their own wisdom, open up their own psychic abilities, maybe learn light language. So I do group classes for that, and then the one-on-one. And you can book a single session with me or a session package if you want to dive really deep and make some progress on the journey. Yeah.
May I ask, are you currently in contact with any other beings or star systems that are assisting in your life now?
Absolutely. And I love that. It's like, because you can listen to my story and be like, oh my God, it's so depraved. It's so dark. I can't even listen to it. But the silver lining is all over the place in here, Brandy. And I love talking about that because I do have so many beings that support me and so many beings that benevolent, loving, um, groups, that I'm working with, not the least of which is the Light Alliance that I mentioned previously with Tira and my mate on that ship. I have a galactic avatar myself that's from the Andromeda Galaxy that exists up there in a pod on that Syrian ship. And I'm in contact with them. I mean, how healing and beautiful is that? Giving me day to day, moment to moment, a really deep and clear understanding of what the heck I'm doing here as Rebecca in this incarnation on this planet right now. So yeah,
Are they the
that's
same
gorgeous.
ones that were on the ship that, and you may have said this, I'm just kind of clarifying. Are they the same
Yeah.
beings that were on the ship when you were split there at that time?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, 100%. Mhm.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Syrian light ship, what it looks like? I mean, can you talk about
Yeah.
that at all?
Yeah. Yes, I can. I can tell that that lights you up, and it lights me up too. It's a
It's
polymorphous ship, meaning it can change shape. It's living, it's conscious, it's alive. It's like a living being. The craft itself is alive, it's conscious. So you can really, like the ships that I was piloting on Mars and out in the Kuiper Belt, you're relating with it through your consciousness, through telepathic means. It's responding to your frequency, responding to your field, responding to what you need, and the sort of commands that you're using through your mind with the ship. So, and it can be cloaked, it can be moving through water, air, other dimensions. It's highly advanced and seemingly like the human body is always kind of changing. They say we run through, all of our cells are replaced in X amount of years. So such is the case with the ship in a way. Just beyond what you
uh,
can think of as far as like technology goes, because this is so next level. It's like when we think of a ship, a spaceship, we kind of think, okay, an airplane, and let's like up level that a little bit, and again. But this is like, no. It's not just this clunky metal thing. It's not that at all. It's living, breathing light consciousness. So that's like a little soundbite of it. And there's portals into other worlds, other places. Yeah, it's it's hard to describe and articulate in human terms. I always feel like our human language in English is just it's too confined. I mean, my language will fail me every time, that I try and
mhm.
describe things that are taking us more into a quantum version of reality rather than a linear 3D space-time continuum reality.
I don't know why, but I feel like some of those ships, some of those sentient ships, they feel like if you were to touch them with these hands, it would feel uh like a whale skin or something, or it has like a
Mm-hmm.
that's the almost like the biological how it feels if I were on the outside touching it. Can it, can you tell me
Yeah.
like more about the technology of being inside? Like, can you just elaborate? You just said a lot there too. If there's more to tell, I would love to
I
hear it.
probably, yeah, I did say a lot there, and you're right. It's like a kind of silky sort of feeling
Yeah.
to our human hand. It would feel kind of sensuous in a way. It's soft and
Mhm.
smooth and it feels good. Like, oh, I like that. I want to experience more of that, please. Yeah. So, um,
It's
the ship, I was not in, I don't remember a lot about the control center of the ship per se, other than we're relating with it first and foremost through the command center of our own consciousness. That's the main thing. And my main experience there now is within a pod. So I know that the pods are wed to my, the technology, the pod is wed to my solar plexus. And I always feel like these, how to say, like almost like a little crystalline structure that's embedded there that's keeping me in stasis on the ship in a way, but also in this human incarnation, like a courting going on of a benevolent sort that keeps things powered in a favorable direction. Yeah.
Do you think that they're are they creating these like are they growing these ships and are they including like genetics of those that would be navigating them?
Are they growing the ships now? That's a beautiful
Yeah.
question. Yeah,
Mm.
I feel like that's a true thing that those ships can be grown and multiplied in a way. What was the second part of your query?
Do you think that they use like the genetics, the biological genetics of the one that would be moving it around, the pilot or what
Oh, the
have you?
person yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're wed together, so but that can change very quickly. It's not something that would take years and years to sort out of, in human terms on Earth. I mean, things can be in flux and changed in ways that are pretty quick. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. It's and my memory and my knowledge of the ship is not it's not entirely comprehensive because I'm there on a pod. I don't have, all the information I wish I would have about everything going on the ship. Although what I can say is that it's a mixed race ship and we've picked up refugees from all over the place. And our
Oh,
directive is more to be observing situations and making sure that we are within bounds in our, let's say, intel gathering, making sure things are on track with our galactic directives, prime directives, if you will, and monitoring things in a way, assisting as we're able, but not in direct, not so much as people would say, why aren't you landing on Earth now? Why aren't you coming to save humans from themselves or, from all these nefarious forces? That's not our main job. But in that shifts somewhat over time. Now we're getting into, again, the Earth time versus off-world time, which can be a little bit different. But the main interest that they had in sending me down into this incarnation into the programs, which I kind of volunteered for, and I mentioned that, was to understand more about the galactic slave trade and what was going on there. So to have somebody firsthand in the situation so that they could gather a lot of intel about it back in these decades when it was really at its heyday, was what I was doing.
that's fascinating. Um, this is my last question because I was going to try to keep it to an hour, if that's unless you want to
Yeah.
go on. I just want to be there's so
No,
much
that's perfect.
information. I want to make it palatable for the listeners, but I could go on it. I have so many questions. Like just hearing everything, I probably have 100 more questions for you. Um, but just to kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
nutshell,
Yeah.
I heard an interesting concept about how each species on each planet has to evolve in kind of like a in their own way, on their own timeline, in an organic way. If there's interference and if they're trying to jump ahead of their evolutionary timeline, that sometimes there can be repercussions. Have you ever heard of anything like that? And perhaps this is uh, part of why there are those prime directives of not being able to interfere uh, with Earth. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think Earth is on its way? I We both said that the planet definitely seems to be resonating higher, and beautiful things are coming in. You mentioned that you feel it. I feel it, and there was two questions there, so I'll stop.
Yeah, I know. Like, what
Mhm.
was the first one? I like go back to the first one, Brandy. What
Sure.
was the first thing?
Like, what are your thoughts on planetary biology needing to
Oh,
evolve on their own, needing to grow spiritually, needing their consciousness to
yeah,
expand in tune with the earthly or the planets, and not jumping ahead, like wanting technology from another place and getting it in that way, sometimes has technological repercussions. What are your thoughts on that?
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for being patient and repeating that for me. Yes, there's
Oh,
so
sorry.
much to do
Love you.
with humanity. Yeah, humanity is tasked with elevating its own consciousness. And once we get to that point, people are saying, well, when are medbeds coming? When are this and that? I'm like, sweetie, you are the technology. You're the highest technology this planet's ever known. So don't be waiting for medbeds. Like advance
100%.
your consciousness, meditate, expand yourself, expand your heart frequency. That's going to change everything on this planet. You have 7+ billion people who are starting to live in the heart space. The heart vibration changes everything in human consciousness. We will have a solution to all the problems on earth if we come back into that landscape. Like that's our superpower as humans. So, that's my answer to
Amazing.
that in a nutshell. There's a lot to
Let's
be said. Like we
go.
can do a whole show just on that. So I love that question though. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for saying that. Sorry I interrupted, but man, it just excites me. I agree with you 100%. Like, I don't think it's necessary to have implants or etheric. Like, I just think we're on this, like, and just to steady the course, as I like to say, just keep going, stay strong, learn to transcend BS in your own life, learn to stay in your loving heart and have compassion. I just love everything that you just said.
Mm. Brandy, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's been good to be with you and your audience today. Thank you.
And you too. We've had some really sweet comments here. May I ask? I do have one question. Do you mind taking a question from the audience quickly?
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
When you're on ship, how do you see yourself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm in a pod, and more is a bit more of a light body. With there's a kind of a, I don't know, a yellowish uniform on the ship, and I'm in a pod, and pretty peaceful in that sweet little space because the pod, like itself, pod's a fractal of the mothership itself. So I'm in a loving embrace, a field of loving embrace, and people are visiting me in these things, and I can journey somewhat through the pod, through my consciousness, and interact with people on the ship. But it's a little more limited since I'm also down
And
here.
does it feel
Yeah.
spiritual or is there a fleshy body there?
Yeah, it's a fleshy body. There's a fleshy body and there's a spiritual body, and I would say they're wed. There's both. There's a physicality to my experience there, very, very much. It's very physical. So
Okay.
yeah, thanks for asking that.
Well, Rebecca, it's just been such a pleasure to have you here. I hope that I just look forward to speaking with you again. There's so much that you brought, and you're just such a beautiful human, and what a great person to be telling the testimony. I love that you tell everything and don't sugarcoat anything. And I'm sorry for some of the experiences you had, and it's so beautiful just to see you stand in your light and stand in your truth and with love on your heart. I really, really respect what you're doing, and thank you for being here, and thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for hanging out with the listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody who's shown up to chat and to listen to this. And Brandy, thank you for your questions and your interest and your passion around the topic. I appreciate being here today. Yeah.
Yay. Thank you, Rebecca. I'll stay in touch and reach out shortly.
Okay, thank you so much. And if people want to find me on Telegram or YouTube or Rumble, they can. Rebecca Rose, Sirius Blue. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I'll add all of the links in the description as well. Bye.
Okay,
Thanks for
bye-bye.
watching.